The worst part wasn't the sale. It was the applause. Crystal glasses chimed against each other in my brother Daniel's dining room while 42 people celebrated the deal of the decade. The chandelier above his reclaimed oak table flickered in warm gold light, reflecting off the polished marble floors he'd installed just last summer. 2.3 million, he said again, slower this time, letting the number breathe. Closed in 11 days. All cash. Everyone clapped. I was still holding my fork when he looked directly at me. And, honestly, he added with a thin smile, it's what happens when someone actually knows how to handle property. The table laughed. Soft, polite, complicit. My face stayed neutral. Inside, something shifted. The beach house he was talking about had once belonged to our mother. And before that, our grandfather. And before that, just sand and stubborn wind. Daniel stood at the head of the table like a keynote speaker. Navy blazer. No tie. Rolex glinting every time he raised his glass. His wife Claire watched him with pride, the kind that comes from believing you married up. He turned to me again. You should really thank me, he said lightly. You've been sitting on that place for years doing nothing. Taxes alone were bleeding you. There it was. The narrative. That I was passive. That I didn't understand leverage. That I needed saving. I folded my napkin slowly. The beach house was in both our names. That much was true. But Daniel handled paperwork. That had always been his thing. Contracts. Meetings. Escrow. He spoke fluent confidence. I preferred silence. A week earlier, he had called me. Got an offer, he'd said. Strong buyer. No contingencies. You want out, right? Let's liquidate. It had sounded efficient. I was traveling. I trusted him. He sent documents through email. I signed what he said were preliminary consent forms. Apparently, tonight was the victory lap. You know what the best part is? Daniel continued, cutting into a steak. We flipped dead weight into generational capital. Dead weight. That house had peeling white shutters. Salt-stained decks. The upstairs window still stuck in humid weather. There was a hairline crack in the kitchen tile where Mom once dropped a cast-iron pan. Dead weight. I took a sip of water instead of responding. Claire leaned forward. We're thinking Cabo in March. Maybe Tuscany in summer. When liquidity moves, you move. Daniel nodded approvingly. Then he delivered the line meant only for me. Some of us were built for growth. Others, he shrugged. Sentiment. A few guests looked uncomfortable. Most didn't. I checked the time on my phone. 8:17 p.m. I had received 3 missed calls earlier from a number labeled Pacific Title Services. I hadn't answered. Dinner felt more instructive. Daniel was mid-story now, describing negotiations with the buyer. They tried to push back at 2.1. I told them we walk. Confidence closes. He loved that phrase. Confidence closes. I watched his hands as he spoke. Animated. Certain. Victorious. Then my phone vibrated again. The same number. This time, I excused myself. Sorry, I said calmly. I need to take this. Daniel gave an exaggerated sigh. Work never stops for some people. A few chuckles followed. I stepped into the hallway. Quiet. Framed family photos lined the wall, Christmases, weddings, curated happiness. I answered. Hello. A woman's voice responded, professional but strained. Is this Michael Harper? Yes. This is Aaron Wallace from Pacific Title Services regarding the property at 2147 Seaview Drive. We have an urgent issue that requires clarification before funds can be released. Funds. My grip tightened slightly. What kind of issue? I asked. There was a pause, not accidental. It appears there is a recorded document discrepancy regarding ownership percentages and a conditional survivorship clause filed in 2016. Silence settled in my chest like something deliberate. I'm sorry, she continued, but based on our review, the property could not have been legally transferred without your direct notarized consent on the final deed. I leaned against the wall. I signed what was sent to me. Yes, sir. We have preliminary consent. But not the amended title adjustment filed 8 years ago. 8 years ago. The year Mom died. The year Daniel insisted we simplify estate complications. The hallway felt narrower. So, what does that mean? I asked quietly. It means, she said carefully, the sale cannot close. And any funds disbursed prior to correction would be subject to immediate freeze pending investigation. In the dining room, laughter rose again, louder this time. Someone must have made a toast. How much has been disbursed? I asked. None yet, she replied. We flagged this before wire release. I closed my eyes. Thank you, I said. We'll need to speak with you first thing in the morning. I understand. I ended the call and stood there for several seconds. The house buzzed with celebration. Daniel believed he had already won. He didn't know the transaction hadn't closed. He didn't know the funds weren't wired. He didn't know the paperwork he rushed through had exposed something far more complicated than a percentage split. I walked back toward the dining room. Through the doorway, I watched him raise his glass again. To vision, he said. To execution. Everyone echoed the toast. I picked up my wine, met his eyes, and smiled, small, controlled. He mistook it for surrender. He had no idea that the real conversation was scheduled for tomorrow morning. And when the title company called back, it wouldn't be to congratulate him. Daniel has always believed that confidence is proof. Proof of intelligence. Proof of authority. Proof of ownership. He learned that early, and I learned something else. When we were kids, Daniel was the one who answered questions before teachers finished asking them. He spoke quickly, confidently, even when he was wrong. Most adults mistook volume for competence. I didn't correct him. I just paid attention. Our grandfather bought the Seaview property in 1974 for $38,000. Back then it was barely more than a wooden structure against wind that smelled like salt and diesel. No central heating. No proper insulation. Just stubbornness and shoreline. Mom grew up there every summer. So did we. After Dad left, that house became her emotional anchor. She never said that directly, but you could see it in the way she stood on the back deck at dusk, hands folded, staring at the horizon like it might answer her. When she was diagnosed, Daniel took control. Hospitals, paperwork, insurance calls. He handled it all. I was the one who stayed overnight in the room. Different roles. Different strengths. 3 months before she passed, Mom asked me to bring her the brown envelope from her dresser. Inside were property documents. I adjusted something, she said quietly. Just in case. I didn't ask what she meant. She looked tired, but certain. After the funeral, Daniel moved quickly. We need to streamline ownership, he insisted. Joint tenancy complicates liquidity. He used words like restructure, optimize, tax exposure. I signed what he told me to sign. But there was one document I didn't. A conditional survivorship amendment Mom had drafted through a local estate attorney 6 months before she died. It adjusted ownership percentages 60% to me, 40% to Daniel, and placed restrictions on sale without both physical notarized signatures present at closing. Daniel never mentioned that clause. I didn't mention that I had a copy. For years, the house remained untouched. Daniel would occasionally bring up unlocking value. You're sitting on equity, he'd say. The market's climbing. I'd nod. What he didn't know was that I wasn't sitting still. In 2019, I formed a small property management LLC, quiet, unremarkable, registered under my middle name. I began learning coastal zoning laws, short-term rental ordinances, insurance leverage strategies. Not because I planned to sell. Because I wanted control. The beach house wasn't dead weight. It was underutilized. Over 4 summers, I renovated selectively. Structural reinforcement under the deck. Hurricane-rated windows. Upgraded plumbing. Total investment, $186,400. I never asked Daniel to contribute. When he asked how maintenance was going, I said, fine. By 2023, the property's appraised value climbed to $2.6 million, not from speculation, but from documented improvements and rising coastal demand. Daniel didn't know the updated appraisal number. He only saw the Zillow estimate. Last month, when he called about the buyer offering $2.3 million, I let him speak uninterrupted. 11-day close. No contingencies. Strong buyer from San Diego, he said. They're eager. Why? I asked. Does it matter? It did. But I didn't push. I reviewed the documents he sent. Preliminary consent forms. Intent to sell. But the final deed transfer required in-person notarization. He scheduled a remote facilitation. I declined politely, saying I was traveling internationally. He sounded irritated. You're overcomplicating this. No, I said evenly. Just following process. What he didn't realize was that I had already spoken, quietly, to Pacific Title Services 2 days before his celebration dinner. I asked a simple question. What documentation is required for disbursement? They listed them. The amended survivorship clause was among them. Daniel never submitted it. Either he forgot, or he assumed it didn't matter. Last night at dinner, when he said, "Some of us were built for growth," I almost corrected him. Growth isn't loud. It's layered. At 9:12 a.m. the morning after his dinner, Erin from Pacific Title called again. Daniel had already contacted them. Your brother seemed surprised, she said carefully. He insisted all documentation was complete. I'm sure he believes that, I replied. He's asking for an expedited resolution. Of course he was. Funds were likely already mentally allocated. Investments promised. Trips envisioned. What are our options? I asked. We need both parties present to re-execute documents acknowledging the 2016 amendment. Without that, the buyer may withdraw. Understood. There was a pause. Mr. Harper, off record, this amendment significantly shifts majority control to you. Did your brother know about it? I looked out my office window at the city's skyline, glass and steel reflecting morning light. I don't think he read that far. Silence on the line. Would you like us to schedule a joint meeting? Yes, I said. Tomorrow. In person. By noon, Daniel called. His voice was controlled, too controlled. Apparently there's some clerical confusion, he said. Is there? They're claiming some outdated clause is blocking release. Is it outdated? Another pause. You didn't mention any percentage adjustment. You didn't ask. The air shifted. Michael, he said, tone tightening, don't turn this into something unnecessary. I'm not. We have buyers expecting transfer. I'm aware. You're not planning to hold this hostage, are you? Hostage. Interesting choice of word. I just want to review everything properly, I said. His breathing sharpened slightly. You've never cared this much about paperwork. He was wrong. I just never cared to argue about it. We'll sort it tomorrow, I finished calmly. After the call ended, I opened my safe and removed the original 2016 amendment. The notary stamp was clear. The estate attorney's signature still bold. Mom's final decision. I ran my thumb lightly over her name. Daniel believed this was a clerical inconvenience. He believed the title company would adjust to momentum. He believed confidence closes. Tomorrow, we would sit across a polished conference table at Pacific Title Services. And for the first time in his life, Daniel would realize that I had been reading the fine print long before he started celebrating. Pacific Title Services occupied the 12th floor of a glass building that tried very hard to look neutral. Neutral carpet. Neutral art. Neutral people trained to remain neutral while money changed hands. Daniel arrived 8 minutes late. Not rushed. Not flustered. Late in the way powerful men believe they're allowed to be. Navy suit this time. Charcoal tie. That same Rolex catching light with every calculated movement. Claire wasn't with him. This was a business correction, not a social one. He gave me a brief nod when he walked into the conference room. Morning. Morning. Erin Wallace sat at the head of the table, a folder opened neatly in front of her. Beside her was a younger associate I hadn't met before, thin-framed glasses, laptop already open. Daniel dropped his leather portfolio onto the table. So, he said lightly, let's clear up whatever confusion is holding up my buyer. My buyer. Erin folded her hands. Thank you both for coming. As discussed, the issue relates to a 2016 conditional survivorship amendment recorded with the county. Daniel leaned back in his chair. I've reviewed all relevant filings, he said smoothly. There was no material change to ownership that would restrict sale. I said nothing. Erin slid a copy of the amendment across the table toward him. There was. He didn't reach for it immediately. Confidence is a posture before it's a position. Michael, Daniel said, Eyes still on Aaron. You had this. Yes. And didn't think it was relevant? It's filed with the county, I replied evenly. That makes it relevant. The associate turned his laptop slightly so Daniel could see the screen. The document was displayed, highlighted in sections. Aaron spoke carefully. The amendment shifts ownership to 60% Michael Harper, 40% Daniel Harper. It also requires both majority and minority holders to physically execute final transfer documentation in the presence of a notary at closing. Remote authorization does not satisfy this clause. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's procedural, he said. We can sign. Yes, Aaron agreed. However, there's an additional condition. She flipped the page. In the event that one party initiates sale without full disclosure of percentage adjustment, the majority holder retains first right of refusal to match or reject the offer before transfer. The room grew smaller. Daniel finally picked up the document. His eyes moved faster now. That's a standard protective clause, he said, but there was less certainty in his tone. It was inserted at your mother's request, Aaron added gently. He looked at me. You knew about this? Yes. And you waited until after I negotiated? I didn't negotiate. His lips pressed thin. The associate cleared his throat. The buyer has already wired earnest money. It's being held in escrow. If the majority holder declines the offer, escrow will refund the buyer. No penalties apply. Daniel leaned forward now. This is absurd, he said, the calm thinning. We have a binding agreement. You have a conditional agreement, Aaron corrected softly. Conditional upon clear, undisputed title. He turned to me fully for the first time. What exactly are you doing? I met his gaze. Reviewing an offer. You had years to review. Suddenly you're cautious. I folded my hands on the table. Suddenly I'm thorough. His voice dropped lower. You're going to tank a $2.3 million cash deal because of sentiment? I let the silence stretch just long enough to be deliberate. Maybe. The word landed heavier than I expected. Daniel exhaled sharply. You're making a mistake. Possibly. Aaron shifted slightly. Mr. Harper, she addressed Daniel, there's another matter. He looked at her impatiently. The buyer's legal team conducted a preliminary improvement audit. They noted recent structural upgrades, window replacements, and plumbing overhauls. He glanced at me. You said you were maintaining it. I was. Aaron continued. Those improvements increased appraised value to approximately $2.6 million as of last quarter. Daniel's head turned slowly toward me. You had it reappraised? Yes. And didn't think to mention that? You didn't ask. The same words. This time sharper. His knuckles whitened slightly against the table's edge. So, what is this? He asked quietly. You think you can do better? I know I can. There it was. The first crack. Not anger. Not yet. Uncertainty. Aaron closed the folder. At this stage, Mr. Michael Harper must formally state whether he intends to exercise right of first refusal or proceed with sale under amended terms. Daniel's phone buzzed on the table. He ignored it. Well, he demanded. I looked at him carefully. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about pattern. About years of decisions made on my behalf. About assumptions. I need 48 hours, I said calmly. His laugh was short and disbelieving. You're bluffing. I don't bluff. He leaned back again, trying to regain altitude. You don't have liquidity to match 2.3. You don't know what I have. Another silence. Aaron nodded. 48 hours is reasonable. We'll notify the buyer of temporary review. Daniel stood abruptly. This is unbelievable. No, I said softly. It's documented. He stared at me for a long moment, searching for hesitation, maybe. He didn't find it. As he gathered his portfolio, he spoke under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. If you think you're about to outmaneuver me, you've miscalculated. I held his gaze. I rarely miscalculate. He left the room first. Through the glass wall, I watched him step into the corridor, phone already pressed to his ear, voice animated. Damage control. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know yet, was that the buyer wasn't the only party interested in Seaview Drive. And unlike Daniel's cash offer, my plan didn't involve selling at all. It involved control. And tomorrow night, at a dinner he had scheduled with investors to celebrate incoming liquidity, his phone would ring again. Only this time, the news wouldn't be procedural. It would be irreversible.